All right, how y'all doing tonight? Cool. You know those vague, recovered memories from your childhood where you can't quite remember if something happened or was just a product of your overactive and immature imagination? This is not one of those memories. What happened to me was 100% real. No embellishments, no confusion between fantasy and reality. Now, don't bail out on me already. I'm not about to tell you how my uncle touched me, or how the clown at my 8th birthday party wanted to make balloon animals behind the shed. It's nothing that serious, nothing that heavy. Unless you mean heavy, as in metal. Because this story starts with that mammoth powerhouse of 80s rock, Twisted Sister. I was young, probably around 4 or 5. My cousin Terry, she was 10 years my senior, and obsessed with Twisted Sister. This was completely acceptable because it was the early 80s and Snider and company were enjoying the height of their popularity. At the time, I had no grasp on what exactly Twisted Sister was, let alone a strong understanding of rock and roll in general. But I was only 5, so what did you expect? I spent most of my time listening to Disney records in my parents' basement, dancing like crazy while singing off-key to the bare necessities. The first time I was exposed to Twisted Sister, I was at my grandparents' house. The majority of our family sat around the living room chatting while the television flickered in the background. My grandpa and Uncle Bill drank coffee while my mother and her sisters helped my grandma clean the kitchen. I was sitting on the floor next to my cousin Joey while his sister Terry sat on the sofa. I was not interested in anything that was being talked about, and I was trying desperately to focus on the television enough to actually hear what was going on. Every time I tried to turn it up, my uncle would bark to turn it back down because the grown-ups were trying to talk. Much to my delight, there was eventually a lull in the conversation, and my grandpa started flipping through the channels to find something to fill the silence. He landed on a channel with a show that looked like female bodybuilders were having an ugliest spandex contest. He let it linger on the screen for a moment before changing it. "Oh, Grandpa, turn it back, please," squealed my cousin Terry. "What?" I don't think my grandpa had a problem hearing her, he just didn't care. "Oh yeah, Dad," said my Uncle Bill. "Turn it back for a second and see what Terry's favorite band is like." What? Another indication that he really didn't care, but for whatever reason, he paused and flipped through the channels until arriving back at the muscle-bound women. It took my young brain more than a few minutes to put together what I was seeing. The channel my grandpa had turned back to was a fresh-faced newcomer to America's cable lineup, MTV. I'd only heard about said channel, although I'd never seen it. I understood that it played videos of bands performing their music. And it was then that I realized I wasn't watching a garish display of women's workout wear. It was actually a group of men dressed in brightly colored, tight-fitting, feminine-looking unitards. And when I say feminine-looking, I really mean that they were full-blown ladies' clothes. And these grown men were wearing them along with a liberal smattering of makeup blasted on their faces, complete with fake beauty marks. I looked back at my cousin, bobbing her head and singing along, wondering if she took her makeup tips from these guys, or vice versa. I observed in complete mind-blowing shock as these ladymen very enthusiastically played music while their gender-confused quarterback of a singer threw himself through a wall screaming, "We're not gonna take it." What? This was my grandpa's third in his sequence of queries. What in the shit is this shit? "They're called Twisted Sister, and they're like my favorite band," my cousin answered. "No, it isn't," he said, flipping the channel as if this declaration could actually will my cousin to change her taste in music. "Come on, Grandpa, there was only like a minute left." "I don't care if there was only a second left. I'm not turning it back for anything." "What are you doing watching this trash anyway? Men dressed as women, carrying on under the guise of rock and roll as if that makes it better somehow. It's an abomination is what it is, and it's sickening to see them acting like there's nothing wrong with what they're doing. Plus, that so-called music is nothing but noise. It's no wonder they have to dress up to distract from how bad they are. Billy, why do you let her listen to this?" My Uncle Bill was laughing at his father's expectantly uptight reaction, while my cousin scowled, silently pouting. Grandpa got up from the couch, tossing the remote in my uncle's lap while continuing to decry this new art form that he was predestined to never understand. Watch whatever you want. Just don't put that twisting. Twisted Sister, Grandpa. They're called Twisted Sister. I don't give a shit if they're the twisted nipples. Just don't put them on in my house. My grandpa left the room, and I could hear him make his way up the stairs. The room settled down, and my uncle switched the channel to the news as my aunts now joined us, and everyone began chatting amongst themselves again. I was preoccupied with what had taken place over the last few minutes. Sure, maybe Twisted Sister wasn't necessarily palatable to the elderly, or anyone 2 or more years removed from puberty, but I didn't think they were going to bring about the apocalypse. My grandpa's reaction seemed kind of extreme. I'd seen him get mad plenty of times, sure, but this time was different. It was like he was really out of sorts. I heard clomping coming from upstairs. Maybe Grandpa was working on one of his many puzzles that he shellacked to pieces of wood and hung on the wall going up the basement stairs. Or perhaps he was just rearranging furniture. Either one sounded better than sitting around watching the news while adults talked, so I decided to slip off and see what he was up to. I was halfway up the stairs when my olfactory senses were overpowered by an abundance of rose perfume. I pulled my shirt up over my nose, trying my best to block the offending odor from my nostrils. I guess my grandpa had broken one of those mini bottles of the stuff that my grandma had, and he would need help cleaning it up. Good thing I was already on my way. I got to the top of the stairs and turned down the hall towards my grandparents' bedroom. The light was on, but when I pushed the door open, no one was there. I did a 180 and saw light spilling onto the floor down the hall through the ajar bathroom door. I padded down the carpeted hallway, my socked feet not making a sound. The perfume grew stronger the closer I was to the bathroom, and I put my shirt/air mask back over my nose. I reached out to touch the door, about to call for my grandpa, but I stopped when I saw what was inside. A strange woman had somehow managed to slip past us all and make her way to my grandparents' bathroom, unnoticed. She had curly red hair and was wearing an ill-fitting purple velvet dress so frumpy it could have been stuffed with rejects from a bowling ball factory. She wore black stockings with a seam going up the back and nowhere near a straight line. Her shoes were black patent leather high heels, which her feet were far too fat to fit in. Excess flesh fought to escape the sides of the pumps and looked like rising bread bursting free from the pan. There was no doubt that this was the woman that was the culprit behind the rose perfume. She smelled like she'd bathed in it after she'd washed her clothes in the stuff. My eyes climbed up the purple potato sack dress, landing on her reflection as she liberally applied a deep red shade of lipstick. I looked at the woman's reflection, and I remember thinking that there were 2 things very wrong. First, she had a 5 o'clock shadow. And second, she looked just like my grandpa. That was when I realized I was not staring at some unknown bathroom-using woman that had snuck into my grandparents' house. I was in fact staring at my grandpa, who was wearing a dress, high heels, stockings, and putting on lipstick like he was getting ready to welcome home the fleet. Oh yeah, he was also humming. I dropped my shirt from my face and opened my mouth to say, "Grandpa?" But temporarily forgot how to make my vocal cords work. My grandpa stopped for a second and tensed up, sensing my presence behind him. The reflection in his eyes in the mirror found mine, and we were suddenly locked in a staring contest. Neither of us entered, and neither of us wanted to win. He too opened his ruby-painted lips, but said nothing. Not knowing what to do, I reacted in the exact opposite manner any other 5-year-old would have. I stepped backwards out of the room, closing the door as I went, never breaking eye contact with my grandpa, until my sightline was completely blocked. I very slowly and quietly made my way downstairs and walked silently through the living room and sat back on the floor in front of the TV. I pretended to be interested in whatever was going on in the news as a pressure built up behind my eyes that caused a ringing in my ears. I realized from this point on, my mind was to be forever clouded with images of every male role model in my life, hiding behind closed doors, secretly dressing like women. I felt hot, I felt cold, I felt numb and confused. Jesus, said my uncle. What is that smell? Mom, did you spill some perfume or something? I froze, not knowing what I was going to do if I was revealed that I was the culprit of who the offending odor had attached itself to. My grandma looked over the stairs and then took a sip of her tea before answering. I'm not sure, Billy. I can't really smell it. Maybe I'm so used to it after all these years that I just put too much on. I'm sorry, dear. It's okay, Mom. Just go a little easy next time. That night, we all left my grandparents' house without seeing my grandpa again. My grandma said he was most likely sleeping, but she'd pass on our good nights to him. My grandma hugged me a little harder and longer than usual and gave me a big kiss on the cheek. Good night, sweetie. Your grandpa and I love you very much. I love you too, Grandma, and Grandpa too. Will you tell him? He knows you do, dear. He knows you do. After that night, I never mentioned this incident again until now. I loved my grandpa very much, and even though I knew something about him that he didn't feel comfortable sharing, he never held it against me. Of course, we never spoke of it or made any reference whatsoever to that night, but we knew that we knew, and for some reason, I believe that made us closer. He's gone now, but whenever I want to remember him, I just turn on a Twisted Sister record, put on some red lipstick, and drown myself in rose perfume. Thank you.